The man put a piece of gum in his mouth. After chewing it quickly a few times, he stuck it firmly to the top of a measuring tape. He then plunged the tape into the toilet bowl. The moment his phone lit up, the man suddenly felt a glimmer of hope for survival. He hurriedly tried to unlock his phone, but with only one hand available, the tape wobbled back and forth, making it impossible to control precisely. He failed to unlock it several times in a row. The phone locked itself for 1 minute. Seeing this, the man felt utterly desperate. One of his arms had been pierced by rebar. If he didn't get it treated soon, he would die from blood loss sooner or later. But what was even worse was that, in less than an hour, the building was scheduled to be demolished by controlled demolition. As the chief designer of the entire project, he knew that once the explosives went off, he would be reduced to ashes along with this toilet. So, as soon as the minute was up, he couldn't wait to try unlocking it again. But the more anxious he became, the more mistakes he made. This time, the gum actually fell off and stuck to the phone. The man cursed under his breath and forced himself to calm down. He had only one piece of gum left. One more failure and he'd be completely finished. This time, he was exceptionally careful and cautious. Fortunately, no mishaps occurred. The phone unlocked successfully. The man was instantly overjoyed and immediately tried to call his wife. Unexpectedly, his hand slipped, and the call went straight to his boss instead. But that wasn't such a bad thing for him. His boss was holding a press conference not far away at that very moment, so he could rush over to help. As soon as the call connected, the man quickly told his boss where he was and what had happened, begging him to come to his rescue immediately. However, after hearing this, the boss first asked if he had called the police. Upon learning he hadn't, the boss immediately said he'd be there right away. Before long, the man heard the sound of his boss's car approaching. He hurriedly shouted for help while banging on the walls to try to get his boss's attention. But the man never expected that instead of coming to his rescue, his boss would cover the entire restroom with a plastic sheet, completely blocking the view from the outside. The man couldn't understand why his boss would do this and fell into a state of utter panic. A moment later, he forced himself to calm down. Since he couldn't count on his boss, he decided to call the police. He immediately dialed the emergency number, but as soon as the call connected, before he could even utter a word, the signal abruptly cut out. Frantic, he tapped his phone repeatedly, but accidentally knocked it over in the process. The man was plunged into utter despair. Faced with this desperate situation, he had no idea what to do. He glanced at the countdown. Less than 30 minutes remained before the explosion. The man decided to give up. To stop struggling, he took off his watch and hung it nearby, intending to wait quietly for the end of his life. But just then, he suddenly caught sight of the toolbox wedged next to the urinal. He vaguely recalled that there seemed to be a dagger inside, so he gritted his teeth, enduring the excruciating pain, and began to turn his body extremely slowly. The rebar embedded in his arm scraped relentlessly against his bones and flesh. As he turned, the excruciating, piercing pain nearly caused him to faint, but he clung to consciousness solely through his will to survive. He struggled to reach beneath the urinal. Then, summoning every ounce of strength, let out a low growl. After an unknown amount of time, the man gradually regained consciousness. Blood was gushing from his arm. He hurriedly tore off his tie and tied it tightly around his arm to stem the flow of blood. He then pried open the toolbox and fished out the dagger, attempting to grind through the bathroom door lock. After rubbing back and forth several times, he was delighted to discover that he had already worn a shallow notch into the lock. His spirits soared instantly, and he increased the frequency of his grinding. With a crisp click, the man successfully severed the lock. He then kicked the restroom door open, slowly pushed aside the green curtain, and wedged a ruler into the door crack to hold it open. Next, the man took off his pants, wrapped them around the hammer, and lit them with a lighter, creating a makeshift torch. He threw the torch through the crack with all his might, hoping the thick smoke from the fire would alert the crowd at the press conference. However, reality dealt him a crushing blow. The torch landed too close to the restroom. Not only did it fail to draw anyone over, but the acrid, thick smoke from the fire instead poured back in through the door crack. At this rate, before anyone outside noticed anything was wrong, he feared he would be choked to death by the smoke. With no other choice, the man scooped up some sewage with his hard hat and personally doused the flame of hope. At this point, there were less than 10 minutes left before the bomb exploded. He had to come up with another escape plan as quickly as possible. Just then, the man noticed something moving outside. He hurriedly peered through a hole in the wall and discovered it was a little rabbit. The bomb's detonator was just a short distance in front of the rabbit. A bold idea popped into his head. He took a carrot out of his toolbox and tossed it next to the detonator, hoping to lure the rabbit over to gnaw through the detonation cord. Just as it looked like he was about to succeed, the man, in his haste, ended up scaring the rabbit away. But he didn't give up. After carefully observing the terrain outside, he quickly came up with a new plan. He unscrewed the cap of his lighter and poured all the remaining kerosene onto a roll of toilet paper, then tossed it through the door crack. The toilet paper rolled along the ground just as he'd hoped, all the way to the detonator. The man was thrilled. He lit the other end of the toilet paper. As the flames spread rapidly, the man's heart leapt into his throat. But just as the fire was about to reach the detonator, fate played another cruel joke on him.